How are you? Welcome to my YouTube channel, Equip, Build, Mature. We're trying to transition from Facebook to YouTube. It's a slow transition. But as what we have been doing on Saturdays right now, we're doing an overview of each book of the Bible. What we're doing is we're learning about each document by asking 5 different questions. So today we're looking at 1 Kings. And the first question is, who wrote the document? Like the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings were originally just one book. In the Hebrew Bible, the book of Kings continued the narrative that was started in the book of Samuel. Now, the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, it separated them into 2 parts, 1st Kings and 2nd Kings. Now, the English title Kings comes from Jerome's Latin Vulgate, the Latin translation of the Bible. Now, no one knows the author of 1st and 2nd Kings. Ezra, Ezekiel, and Jeremiah have been suggested as possible authors, but the entire work covers more than 400 years. So this indicates that several source materials were used to collect all these records. But there is evidence like literary styles, themes throughout the book, and the type of information used that indicates a single person compiled all of this information and not multiple people. Now, the person, whoever this person was, they assembled the manuscript while God's covenant people were in exile in Babylon. You can read of this in 2 Kings. But the author did not finish the work, or the compiler did not finish the work until the Babylonians had already released King Jehoiakim after he was in prison for 37 years. That's in 560 BC. So the author likely completed the document within another 20 years. So what time in history is this? Well, 1 Kings begins by describing the final days of King David, which is around 971 BC. It also described the conspiracies about who would be the king, who would sit on the throne after David's demise. Well, when David died, when we read of this in 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 10, his son Solomon gained the throne. And he established himself as a strong leader and as a wise leader. Now, in the early years of Solomon's rule, Israel experienced its glory days. Its influence, economy, and military power had very little opposition in the region. Israel's neighbors did not present any strong military threat to them. But soon after Solomon died, in about 931 BC, we see this in 1 Kings 11:43, the kingdom of Israel was divided into 2 kingdoms, the northern kingdom called Israel and the southern kingdom called Judah. Now, 1 Kings follows the history of this divided kingdom through the year 853 BC. So why is 1 Kings so important? Well, the kings ruled under God's authority who remained faithful to the law and experienced God's blessings. But the kings that departed from the law, they experienced curses. Now, 1 Kings reveals Solomon's relationship with God. It emphasizes that Solomon's wisdom and Solomon's wealth were God-given. God was the source of all that he had, all the blessings. Now, Solomon's reputation reached far beyond Israel's borders, all the way down south into what we know as Yemen today, probably the Queen of Sheba's home. We read of the Queen of Sheba in 1 Kings chapter 10, verses 1 to 13. Now, Solomon's many marriages and large harems are well known and well documented. But in his later years, they led to his faith being rootless and drifting. But Solomon did build the temple. This was where God allowed his name to dwell among these people. 1 Kings also introduces the prophet Elijah. Now, he announced God's judgment on the evil king Ahab of the northern tribes of Israel. Now, Elijah did many miracles, and God gave him a dramatic victory in this confrontation with the false prophets on Mount Carmel. We read of this in chapter 18, verses 1 through 46. So what is the big idea? Well, 1 Kings was written to record history. But what is more significant than just history is that it teaches the lessons of history. The history recorded in 1 Kings was meant to preserve important events and spiritual truths that are learned through those events in history. In the books of 1st and 2nd Kings, each king is evaluated based on his reaction to his covenant responsibility to God's law. That was the proof of whether he did evil or he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. Now, some kings were often harshly rebuked, and those moral details are not usually recorded by those that are simply writing history. Along with the kings, God's spokesmen, the prophets, are very prominent in the book of 1 Kings. The prophets proclaimed God's word to mostly hard-hearted rulers. So 1 Kings is written from a prophet's perspective. They always connected the nation's situation with the king being faithful to God or faithless towards God. We gain great moral insight from the history of Israel and Judah through 1 Kings. So how does a book like this apply to me? Well, Solomon was known as the wisest man of his time. He may have been the wealthiest man of his time. He greatly enjoyed God's blessing in so many different ways and aspects of his life. But his faithless actions in his later years tainted his legacy. In direct opposition to God's command for a king not to marry many wives, as is stated in Deuteronomy 17:17. So in opposition to that, Solomon married many foreign women. Now, 1 Kings expresses grief in 1 Kings 11:4. When Solomon became old, his wives, listen to this, shifted his allegiance to other gods. He was not wholeheartedly devoted to the Lord his God, as his father David had been. The problem was, Solomon began to trust his fortune. He began to trust his military might. And he began to trust his political alliances instead of trusting God, who had provided him with all the blessings that he was experiencing. He focused on the gifts rather than the giver. We often do the same. We appreciate the gifts, we enjoy the gifts, we worship the gifts, and forget the Creator. At times, we do this terrible thing to God. We exchange his truth for something man-made, and we suppress his truth so we can think we're the ones in charge, we're the ones that have accomplished something. So the question I want to end as offer you as we end this video is, are there any direct commands of God that you're ignoring in your life? Today, I challenge you, take time to remember all the blessings in your life. And once you think of them, thank God for those blessings, because he is the source of every blessing. Trust only God as your source of strength and your source of significance, not your possessions, not your position. I'll close with this, Psalm 27, because I think it sums up what Solomon missed. Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. Thank you guys for dropping by. Hope you have a great Saturday, and may God continue to bless you as you trust in him above all things, everything else. Take care.